Hey, so here we are in the Halo Infinite beta. I finally got into this thing. And this is right now against the bots. This is the big team battle flight, but that isn't launched at this exact time of day. So, we can benchmark this against the bots, which is also easy for other people to run against. Now, what settings am I running? Well, we are at, first of all, it's an RX 6800 XT, and I guess I was actually resolution scaled down. We should probably put that back to 1440p, which is what I meant to be. And we are on the Ultra preset. I had put that back to 100%. I've noticed sometimes the graphic settings don't seem to save on a restart. So let me double check this is actually saved now. There we go. So we're at 1440p. And the other thing I'll mention is that definitely turn off the minimum, maximum, and VSync frame rate stuff. When I left this at default when the game started, I thought my frame rate was terrible. I thought it was in like the 30s. But I think this stuff is just bugged. Turn that off. Because as soon as I turned all that off, I don't know which one it might have been, but I turned them all off. Suddenly my frame rate was much, much better. So we're at Ultra, 1440p. We will try out some other settings, and we will try out some other resolutions. But overall, I've got to say that I'd love to be getting in the hundreds of frames per second, but we're at 1440p Ultra. So, don't mind if I'm staring at the top right frame rate counter rather than aiming. So don't judge me too hard. Played a lot of Halo back on the Xbox 360. What was that? Okay, so I think we've got enough here at these settings to get an idea of what our frame rates are. It looks like mid-80s, and varies a little bit. I should probably aim at the head rather than staring at the frame rate counter. Actually get a kill here despite this being a graphics test video, not a gameplay show-off. Okay, so let's actually scale this down just for the sake of it to about 1080p. Actually, we can do exactly 1080p. So 1080p, using the built-in resolution scaler, so that might be slightly different than what you get at actually running at 1080p. But let's see, so that does boost us over 100 frames per second, and again at maximum settings. So on an RX 6800 XT, I'd certainly hope I'm maxing the game out at 1080p and 1440p with good settings. But again, in competitive games, a lot of times it makes sense to turn graphic settings down as well. Now, one thing you might notice that I've noticed here, because I tested this out a little bit before filming, is that the CPU usage seems way too high. And notice that it's like 100% all the time, even when I was at 1440p, and then also at 1080p. And check this out. Even if I go to 4K, let's do that next. So we'll go to 4K next. We want to go all the way up to 2160p. My frame rate goes down, so we can get about 60 frames per second. We bounce around in the 50s and 60-ish. But like, notice that the CPU usage is still 100%. So I don't know if this is something that's just going on with the beta, or if this is going to be an issue with the final release. I would assume not, because they got a few months. I wonder if there's some like harsher DRM. A lot of times betas have more strict DRM to avoid the game getting cracked or something like that. While it's still in beta. Shotgun was not good at that range. But again, this is this graphics test. I'm not really paying attention to the shooting. Anyway, so yeah, the CPU usage seems way too high. And I'm just going to chalk that up to being a beta because it seems like I'm CPU bottlenecked, except for the fact that I can increase and decrease the GPU settings, and the CPU's usage just stays at 100%. And yes, I've restarted the game and made sure it's not anything else on my computer that's doing this. Game seems pretty fun, by the way. I know I'm just playing versus bots. The guns feel good. Anyway, so that's at 4K. So it looks like we can get 60 FPS maxed out at 4K on an RX 6800 XT. Again, at 1440p. It looks like we were doing in the, like, what was it, 80s or 90s? Yeah, mid-80s it looks like for the most part. And again, this is on a smaller arena map. Later on, hopefully, I can do a video testing out the actual big team battle. And then we can go over 100 frames per second at 1080p. Can I also mention that the resolution scaler to me looks really good? Like playing the, I'm even gonna go all the way down to here, 55%, let's just see. So I'm playing this on a 1440p resolution, upscaled from 55%. I've gotta say this actually looks really good. I think the game's built-in resolution scaler is very good. So even if this game doesn't have DLSS or FSR, I think the built-in resolution scaler is one of the best ones I've seen. Just now, I'm not doing a side-by-side, but just judging off of my just eyeball test, like I can tell this isn't native resolution, but it sure doesn't look like 720p. So they're doing some kind of very good quality render scaling as far as I can tell, just from, you know, actually playing rather than doing side-by-sides. Okay, let's go back to 1440p, and let's see what kind of impact the actual graphic settings have. So again, we're at mid-80s, basically, on average, when we're at 1440p Ultra. So now let's turn down some of the actual graphic settings. So let's go down to high. Now notice it warns me that the texture quality is going to stay and not restart until a restart. You know what I mean? But on my GPU, the texture quality really shouldn't be affecting the frame rate. Well, I can say dropping from Ultra to high didn't get us a whole lot. We went from like the low mid-80s to maybe like the higher mid-80s. What's my grenade throw button? It's G? Okay, let's do that. So I'd say going down from Ultra to high did not seem to really do a heck of a lot for us. I was hoping to have a grenade. I didn't. What's my melee button? Ah, I usually map it to my mouse button. I didn't change my settings. Get an overshield. Okay, we're testing graphic settings. I'm actually enjoying this. You know what? I have high hopes for this. I haven't really enjoyed Halo much since Halo 3 on the Xbox. Okay, going down to medium settings, we did get a bit of a bump. We're into the mid-90s now. Again, that CPU usage just seems like complete nonsense, so I don't know, just like ignore it, I guess. It's a classic kill. I've never heard that before. Oh, did I not have grenades? I was gonna get a double. Okay, yeah, so I think that's enough on the medium settings. Let's go ahead and take a look at low settings. I've gotta say, all the settings seem to look pretty good. Like, yeah, this is low settings. I'm over 100 frames per second now at 1440p. I've gotta say, with the, again, the textures are still up at the maximum, and I think for a multiplayer shooter, like, this still looks really good at low. Sure, we could do side-by-sides and find some differences, I'm sure, but we also didn't gain a huge amount of frame rate going from Ultra to low, but, like, it did make a difference. We're in the low 100s rather than the low to mid-80s, so it does make a difference. I like the feel of the pistol. Kill frenzy, guys. I'm better than the bots. Look at me go. Anyway, so that's at low. Now, what if we did low at up-resed from 1080? So, in other words, what if we just want to play competitively? So, like 1080p up-resed to 1440p. This resolution scaler looks good, I've got to say. I can tell in the lines on here. Those don't look as crisp anymore. But the actual just like game, the character models and everything, renders up pretty good. I can tell on the edges. So it's not perfect, but now, hey, we're at 120 frames per second, basically. Also, there's a little bit of overhead to my recording, and this isn't even the final build of the game. So I think the last thing I'll do is just test out what if we were rendering at 4K, but 4K low settings, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense anyway, but let's just see. So it looks like at low settings, 4K, we can be up in the 70s. This feels perfectly sharp. But doesn't make a lot of sense for a competitive game. It would make more sense to be up-resing from either 1440p or maybe 1800p, something like that, if you're actually playing on a 4K screen in a multiplayer game. All right, let's go ahead and end it here. Maybe get one last kill. Hopefully this was useful info for anybody on a 6800 XT. The final game will probably do even better. Have an excellent day.